Welcome. So, you've been thinking about how governments get their money right and whether that whole system actually lines up with, people doing well.
It's a really fundamental question.
Exactly. And we've got this source that kind of dives into where the money comes from, how it's handled, and maybe why things sometimes feel disconnected, even with resources available.
Yeah, the source highlights this tension, doesn't it? Governments have access to national wealth, but we still see significant hardship. It makes you question the link.
Totally. So our mission here is basically to unpack those government funding mechanics and explore some of these complexities the source brings up.
And to understand today, looking back helps.
Oh, for sure. The source points out taxation isn't new at all. We're talking like the Pharaoh in Egypt 5,000 years ago, collecting grain tax.
Wow, yeah, 20% grain tax.
And then Julius Caesar, he brought in sales tax. And later, Caesar Augustus started direct income tax.
It really shows that this idea, contributing to the collective, it's got deep, deep roots.
That history really sets the stage, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It shows this constant need for governments to fund things. And those early methods, well, they paved the way for what we have now.
Okay, so fast forward to today. How does the money come in now? The force emphasizes payroll taxes, social insurance. That's a big one.
Right.
If you're an employee, it's about 40% going to the government.
Yeah.
But if you're self-employed, it's more like 60%, covering both sides.
Yeah, the employer and employee portions and businesses.
Businesses chip in about 20%.
Mm-hmm.
The source suggests the thinking there is it encourages them to hire people.
And these payroll taxes, they often go towards things like Social Security, unemployment benefits, crucial safety nets. The different rates just reflect who's paying, essentially.
Okay, what about investors? The source notes they generally don't pay direct taxes on, like, their initial investment capital.
The idea being that putting capital to work is good for growth.
But that's often debated, right?
Oh, definitely. Economists argue about the fairness, the effectiveness. Does it really incentivize investment as much as claimed compared to, say, other taxes?
Then there's VAT, value-added tax, on everyday stuff.
Yeah.
Groceries, gas.
Cigarettes, alcohol.
Yeah. The source says it's maybe 1 or 2% overall contribution, but it also mentions that for many people it feels like double taxation.
Right, because it's money you already earned and paid income tax on, now being taxed again when you spend it.
Even if the rate seems small per item, it's everywhere.
Exactly. It hits a huge chunk of consumer spending. It adds up.
And we can't forget other things like taxes on flying, road taxes, import duties.
Oh, yeah, import taxes. The source specifically flags how those can really hit developing countries hard.
Because they rely more on bringing goods in.
Precisely.
Yeah.
So tax policies in one place can have these big ripple effects, especially for nations that aren't heavily industrialized.
So the government gets all this money, or, well, plans for it.
Yeah, it's an estimate, isn't it? Tax revenue isn't guaranteed.
Right. So how do they manage? The source talks about treasury bills and bonds.
Treasury bills are like short-term loans from the public. Bonds are longer-term with fixed interest.
So borrowing, basically, to smooth things out.
Exactly. Vital tools to manage cash flow, fund big projects, especially if tax income dips unexpectedly, bridges the gaps.
Okay, so we've covered the how. But back to that big question the source raises. Why do people still starve when nations have resources?
It's complex. The source points to a few key things.
Like conflict.
Yeah, conflict is huge. Destroys farms, forces people to move, causes inflation, makes food suddenly unaffordable.
And natural disasters, too. Droughts, floods.
Right, which can create dependence on aid. But the source also critically looks at public policy.
You mean like bad decisions?
Or lack of investment, not putting enough into agriculture, for instance, or potentially mismanagement, maybe even greed affecting how tax money is used.
So it's not just about having the money.
Not at all. Poor governance, bad policy choices, these can stop resources from actually helping people even when the money is technically there.
So wrapping this up,
Yeah?
governments use this whole mix, old taxes, new taxes, borrowing to get funded.
A whole toolkit.
But just having the funds, as the source shows, doesn't automatically mean society thrives. Conflict, disasters, and critically policy choices. They seem to be the real deciders.
Precisely. Which brings us back to your first point. Understanding the funding is step one. Step two, the harder part, is making sure it's used effectively and fairly for everyone.
Okay, so here's something to chew on. Considering all these different income streams and ways the money is managed, if you had to pick just one area of revenue management to optimize, which one do you think could have the biggest positive kick for society's well-being?